Hello and welcome to the second video we're using to plan our local flavor painting. My name is Eric, and today we're going to be talking about taking our underpainting that we have taken a couple steps here already. We've done our underpainting and we've done a sketch on top. I realized that time-lapse was a little hard to see, but you can see my sketch here. I did a little bit of linear perspective with two vanishing points. This is a 2-point perspective. These lines are going to be vanishing over to here. These lines are coming back this way. Both would be off the canvas as they're receding. But that's how I planned it. A little bit of linear perspective, I think, is a good way of looking at a subject matter rather than straight on. It's kind of a boring composition. You may also notice that in the underpainting, it's not a perfect plan. This part, sort of peak of the house here, is outside of my planning stage where I thought it was before I made any sort of sketching. That's okay. I'm not worried about that. I'm going to still be painting directly on top of this. And it's going to be significantly easier than painting on a white canvas. I guarantee that. Right, so today we're going to be talking about mixing some colors. Everybody's going to have different compositions and subject matters, so it's difficult for me to show a lesson on mixing every kind of color, but I'm going to try and show you good tricks. One of the things that's going to happen is the colors that you have are very bright and bold, say like a cadmium red or a cobalt blue. Very artificial, very bright, very bold. And in some cases, that's beautiful and it's exactly what you want. But when you're trying to emulate reality, as we are in this case, I have this house that I'm using for my source material. We have to neutralize those colors. As you see here, this could be considered red or an earthen red, but something like this is ridiculous. It's going to look very odd and not very realistic. And there's a couple ways of neutralizing some of the chroma or sort of artificial boldness of that color. We talked a little bit last time, as I talk, I'm going to put you here in studio view. We talked a little bit last time on using a brown, like a raw umber, to neutralize color. That's an okay way. A very easy way in an underpainting, but not really the right way of neutralizing color. The right way is using complements. See if I can get you set up here where you're not wobbling. All right, it's using the complements, so a little bit of color theory is going to be involved here. Let's get this in the perfect spot there. All right, so I have my wet palette here. I have organized my palette slightly. Notice that I have sort of an empty space in the center. That's where I'm going to be mixing colors. I'm going to be pushing them to the side. It may seem, it's kind of hard to see maybe on the camera. This is actually dry here, or very close to dry. There is some paint. Most of my paint is pooling in piles, though. Every once in a while, I'll take my tool, my palette knife, and just sort of pull it back, making sure that it stays fairly clean when I'm mixing. But even if colors mix that aren't supposed to mix, minor bits of color are okay. It's another theory called local color. Okay, so we started out with this very bold cadmium, and then we have neutralized using my raw umber and white to get to these here. So I have the original color, and then we have two colors here. From what I saw from here, it's not bad, but I need to darken it still, and I need to darken it without adding, once again, a very large amount of saturation. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of the green. Now I used a little bit of green last time. I've added a little bit more of the ultramarine to this green. It's a more vibrant green now. I might add another little bit and mix another green here in a little bit, but here we go. So I'm going to take a little bit of the green, put it centralized, and take some of this and bring it back in. If I got a little bit of that, that's okay too. So right off the bat, you can see that went way, way green. I put too much. That's okay, because we still have a lot of this, and if we have to, we can pull it back. So bring this back in. So red and green are complements. Just like blue and orange are complements, we're going to be neutralizing some blue here in a minute with some yellow. Mix it a little bit of red to get that orange. So that grayed out pretty dramatically there. Maybe too much, but once again, color's pretty malleable. If this sort of goes too far in one direction, you can take part of this and mix into a larger portion of a more pure color. If, say, once again, I went too far, I'm not sure if I have gone too far yet. Once again, you'll notice that it's very neutral. It's almost a gray now. It maybe lost a little bit too much of that red. Once again, if that happens, when I put that first coat on and I decide that it's not red enough, I'm just going to take a little portion of this, add a larger portion of my pure cadmium, or one of these that have already been muted out, and it will pull back. But sometimes mixing it over and over into one pile can be a little bit of a mess. You get too much paint, and things go a little bit of awry. So I'm going to bring this back to my red side, because I still need the center to mix. And if these are running into each other, I don't really care. It's good to have some mixing, some unplanned mixing on your palette. Okay, so I've neutralized the red, maybe too far, but it's still where we need it to be. Now we're going to neutralize some blue. What I've done is I have some yellow here. I'm going to grab a little bit more of this red, mix it into this yellow. And I got sort of a yellow-orange here now. So I'm going to take some of this yellow-orange, straight in the center. And I will also take this and neutralize it later for the sort of cream color here. Either the yellow or the yellow-orange, I'm not sure yet, but a lot of white and a little bit of that yellow to neutralize that tone. But we have some orange here. Take some pure ultramarine and mix it right in. You notice it almost went a little bit too green. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit more red. That just means I didn't have enough red in the orange off the bat. So the most important thing in color mixing, guys, is that it's malleable and you can keep working into color even if you go too far in one direction. As, once again, I may have done here. I'm unsure yet until I get it on the canvas. Sometimes color on your palette appears significantly differently than it does on your canvas. So always test before you get frustrated. And then once again, if this is too green, what I'll do is I'll take a little portion of it. I'll grab more blue. I'll blow it out with blue. And then I'll try again. The biggest thing, though, guys, is don't just continue to add to one pile. Same thing. If this is too neutral, I'll pull portion out and then bring some red back into it. And it's good to have multiple tones. You'll have unnatural sort of transitions and many natural transitions within the composition that would seem unnatural as far as color on top of each other. And we'll get to that. Because like when you look at, if I can zoom in on this, this is not all one color. There's a lot of iteration within that color. Same thing within the darker value here. So it's good to have colors that are close to each other. Once again, this is a little bit more blue, that's a little bit more green. Same thing, we're going to keep mixing a couple more colors. I'm going to try and pull these to the side. I sort of have lost my organization on my palette. I sort of had reds, yellows, blues, and greens. And I had this umber here. Try and get this umber out of the way. Move this back into that section there. I got a little bit of umber in it, so I'll move that back into that. Okay, and then as I'm continuing, I get a lot of paint colors on here. What I'll do is I'll just take my palette knife and just sort of clean the center. You do lose a little paint that way. If you're very careful, you can kind of bring it back to where it belongs. But I always keep a section that I'm mixing on. Okay, so we have some ground color, we have some house color, we muted some blue. The other thing is that now that I have some of these darker colors, when I'm looking at the sky, this is obviously very, very dark to what I'm looking for. So I'll be mixing white, and you can always add more white, especially with a blue or a violet, as you may have noticed in your first painting. is very dramatic against a pure hue. So it's definitely darker than the value next to it. I can still add a little bit of white, but I could take this, keep a little bit of it to make sure I have that little bit of a darker value, and then add white again, and blow it out a little bit. And you'll notice that it's a more natural blue now. It's not as artificial as just the ultramarine and white. It's still in the blue category, going towards sort of a tealish green, but it's neutralized through a little bit of color theory. Okay, same thing, green here. You can add a little bit of red to neutralize. I'm going to always keep a little portion just in case I want to use it. So I'm going to save a little bit of that and then move right in to getting a little bit of red in there. That green just ate that red, so we're going to put a little bit more. Notice I'm not really cleaning my palette knife off in between. So just rubbing it and then moving. Okay, so that's a richer green there. That's looking good. I like that as a base color. Now I'm thinking of ways that I'm going to want some highlights. So what I'm going to do is I have a nice deep base color. I'm going to take most of it, push it to the side. Now I have two greens here, the lighter green and the one that's a little bit darker. I have this residual green here that I'm going to put a fair amount of yellow directly into. Now the green's going to eat the yellow pretty dramatically. You always want to usually go the other way. A little bit of poor planning, but that's okay. You can always make your portion a little bit larger. Got that there for that reason. It would usually be smarter to mix the yellow-green first and then just add little bits of blue. The blue is much stronger than the yellow in that color. But, once again, color is malleable. There's lots of different ways to get the color you're looking for. So pretty quickly, I'm starting to develop a pretty nice palette here. I've got 3 greens, 1, 2, 3, 4 blues, sort of maybe a mistake here, but kind of an off blue-green, see what happens. I still have my umber, about 4 reds here. I still need to tint out a portion for my gazebo area, and I also need something for the dark value of the roof and these shutters. You'll notice that black was not a color on your materials list. That's because black is kind of a sort of a faux pas in painting. Most painting teachers will tell you not to use black because it dulls too much and it sort of takes the color theory out of the equation. There's a lot of different ways of mixing a sufficient black pretty easily. One way would be a chromatic black, taking equal portions of, say, red, yellow, blue, the primaries, or a secondary chromatic black, which would be an orange, blue, violet, equal portions. Sometimes that's more difficult than what it's worth. So what I like to do is just raw umber and ultramarine. 2 colors are easier than 3. So I'm just going to take a little bit of ultramarine here, make sure I don't have too much white in that, because a little bit of white can make a difference. And then about equal portion of that umber. We'll mix that all together here. We went a little heavy on the umber, but we'll see. No, we're looking pretty good. So equal portion ultramarine and raw umber. Some people use burnt umber. But you notice pretty quickly we get a very, very deep value there, almost like black. And then you can take this and add just a little bit of white, and you can get nice gray tones as well. So I think that this is a much better way of getting a black rather than just coming in and using a black out of a tube. Very simple, equal portions, raw umber, ultramarine. Once again, there's a number of ways of mixing a black, but this is one of the easier ways. Okay, things are looking pretty good. Last thing I'm going to mix, my palette is filling up a little bit here, is this cream color. What I'm going to do is just kind of take the majority of this white that I got left, And just take a little bit of that. That's just yellow with a little bit of red in it. And that's good for now. Got a nice pale yellow there. It might still be a little bit artificial. To mute this out, you would use just a little bit of violet. You can mix a quick violet here, red, right into the ultramarine here. Get a little nice, decent dark violet, and just add the littlest bit. You can always add more. Very difficult to reduce. Yeah, I'll get a little bit more. Once again, it's always easier to just add more than, got a little green in there too. It's okay. Overall, it has enough white. It's probably like 80% white. It'll hold its weight. It won't matter if you get a little bit of that residual color in it. Okay, there we go. I basically have my palette here. I have kind of a mess, but tried to stay a little bit organized as far as my colors. My blue values here, and if I needed more ultramarine pure, I would just take a little bit here, but I don't think I will. I think my mixed colors will be sufficient. Got 3 greens, 4 reds, 3 yellows. Got my black value mixed from a dark umber, or a raw umber, and an ultramarine. Once again, adding white to get gray value. So, that's kind of the setup. You can set up your palette as needed, as everybody's going to have different subject matter. But hopefully you saw a couple tricks that can help you move through the early stages of color mixing. And once again, neutralizing the really bold tone of paint that's straight out of the tube. There are still areas like the green, I could use a little bit more red to neutralize, but we'll get to that point as we're mixing for the actual painting here.